Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating and frankly radical blueprint called Indonesia Reborn. The whole idea here is that the nation is facing a deep spiritual crisis, and the solution it proposes is a wild mix of the ancient and the futuristic, a complete and total constitutional overhaul. So, let's start with this powerful quote from Indonesia's first president, Sukarno, because this is exactly where the authors of the blueprint begin. They use it to frame their entire argument as this profound internal struggle, a fight not against some foreign enemy, but a fight for the very soul of the nation itself. And this struggle, according to the book, doesn't start with politics or economics. Nope, it starts with a diagnosis of what it calls a national sickness of the soul. At the heart of it, the authors argue that Indonesia's facing a fundamental crisis of legitimacy. You know, that unspoken social contract, that essential bond of trust between the people and the state? They say it's been completely torn apart. And this isn't just some political problem. It's a breakdown of the very foundation that holds a nation together. And they trace the roots of this crisis way, way back, hundreds of years, in fact, to what they call mental colonization. This is the idea that authentic, local Nusantara worldviews, ones built on collaboration and community, were slowly but surely replaced by foreign ideologies that championed a kind of transactional individualism. The result? A profound loss of cultural identity. Okay, and check this out, because this is the data the book uses to back all this up. It shows this stark paradox. The public has massive trust, we're talking over 91%, in hierarchical institutions like the military. But that trust just plummets for democratic pillars like political parties. I mean, that's not just a gap, that's basically a public verdict on a system they feel has completely failed them. So where did this all go wrong? Well, the authors trace this crisis of trust all the way back to the nation's founding documents. And get this, they argue that Indonesia has been hobbled by not one, but two failed constitutions. First, they take a hard look at the original 1945 constitution. They say the framers, people like Supomo, had a really noble intention. They wanted to build a state based on authentic Nusantara concepts, like Kakil Gawargan. Think of it like a national family spirit, a sense of harmony, to avoid the problems of Western individualism. But here's the tragedy they point to. When they tried to write these beautiful ideas into modern law, they mistranslated them. They ended up using the legal vocabulary of 1940s totalitarian states they admired, like Germany and Japan. So that spirit of collaboration got twisted into a structure that basically rejected individual rights and created a system that was incredibly vulnerable to authoritarianism. So then, fast forward to the post-Suharto reforms, the constitutional amendments that were supposed to fix all of this. The blueprint describes them as a reactive patchwork job. Instead of a clear new vision, it was just a series of emergency fixes that, you guessed it, ended up creating a whole new set of crises, especially the rise of money in politics on a scale no one thought was possible. I mean, this quote just illustrates the point perfectly. It's a pretty startling admission from Amin Rais, one of the key architects of those very amendments. Years later, he's basically expressing his shock and regret, saying, "We thought it was impossible to bribe an entire electorate. But it turns out we accidentally built a system where it could happen." Just wow. So this is the trap they're talking about. The nation is just stuck, caught between two failed models. You've got the original Constitution's risk of a dictator, and the amended version's reality of a dysfunctional, money-driven system. The authors argue neither path works. The only way forward, they say, is a complete reset. All right, so after painting that pretty bleak picture, the blueprint pivots to its solution, and it's a radical one. It's a full-on return to what it calls the authentic, lost wisdom of the Nusantara ancestors. First up, they say you have to restore the soul of the state, and you do that by recovering the original meaning of Pancasila, not as some political slogan you have to memorize, but as Pancasila Dasar Selera, an internal technology, a personal journey for spiritual evolution to forge what it calls the perfect human. And then there's the body, the actual structure of this new state. It's a governance model called Tritang Tudi Buwana. This is an authentic Nusantara architecture built on three collaborative pillars. The goal here is functional harmony, not the adversarial checks and balances that are so central to Western models. And you can see on this slide just how deep this recovery of meaning goes. The blueprint argues that the original spiritual interpretation of Pancasila, which was all about an inner journey, later got flattened into a political tool by Sukarno. And then it got hardened even more into a rigid, top-down doctrine under Suharto. This proposal wants to go all the way back to that original, deeper source. Yeah, this really lays it all out. On one side, you have the Western model, which is basically built on the assumption of conflict and suspicion. And on the other, you have this Nusantara model, Tritongtu, which is based on the complete opposite, collaboration and trust, aiming for harmony through ideas like mutual education, compassion, and care. Okay, so that's the philosophy. But what does it actually look like? How do you translate this ancient wisdom into a modern functioning government? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the architecture they propose. So, they completely redesign the legislature. It becomes this hybrid system. You get a new upper house, the MMN, filled with nonpartisan statesmen who are selected purely for their merit. Their only job? To set the long-term strategic direction of the nation. The lower house, we all know, the DPR, is still there, but its role is refocused on oversight and budgets. It's all about separating deep wisdom from daily politics. But how do you find these incredible statesmen for the MMN and other top jobs? Well, the blueprint's answer is to replace direct elections for these specific roles with a super rigorous merit-based selection process. It's basically a machine designed to find and elevate true leaders, not just the most popular politicians. And this selection machine has 3 different ways in, 3 gates to leadership. The main path is for people who have proven themselves by rising up through the ranks of community service. But there are also paths for people with exceptional national achievements, and even for those who are nominated directly by a massive public petition. It's about balancing grassroots service with recognized excellence. And this is where the ancient meets the ultra-modern. To ensure absolute integrity in this whole selection process, the system uses artificial intelligence. Seriously, an AI called Residigital acts as a kind of servant of integrity, automatically verifying every single credential and analyzing a candidate's record for any financial or ethical red flags. It's basically a digital firewall against corruption. So in the end, what we're looking at here is a breathtakingly ambitious proposal. The core argument is that to fix a sick political system, you first have to heal the nation's soul. It's this wild fusion of ancient philosophy and cutting-edge AI to solve the problem of political decay. And it leaves us with this really provocative question. Can a nation actually find its future by returning to its deepest past?